So arriving this week is this full moon in Capricorn, a very intense full moon that comes at a stage of the current astrological moment where there's a lot of challenge, a lot of pressure. And this full moon is conjoined Pluto, and so we're digging even deeper in terms of the symbolism with this moment. So yeah, I just want to do a deep dive into the full moon in Capricorn here, happening on the 13th of July. It happens at almost 7 p.m. here where I am in Central Europe. We're talking about 3 days out from now, less than 2 days now. So this will define this coming week. It happens on Wednesday, and we have this peak of energy of this full moon here in Capricorn. It comes, like I said, at a very intense time. The Pluto return that is in the American Sibley chart. So there's a lot of intensity, particularly in America, which, as we know, is the largest economy in the world. But, this intense period we've been in, I saw this week, we saw the Sri Lanka protests where the government was taken down. Very, very fitting for Mars and Taurus symbolism. My favorite thing was seeing those protesters lounging after protesting. Just perfect Mars and Taurus symbolism. But this full moon comes as a climax within this context of what I've been calling the fixed sign pressurized summer, or the pressure of the fixed signs of summer 2022. Let's just take a look here at the chart of the full moon. You can see it here, 7 degrees off of Pluto. And you've got Mercury with the Sun, you've got Jupiter squaring from Aries by sign. Both malefics are either averse, so Saturn is averse to the Sun and the Moon, or Mars is sextile trine the Sun and the Moon. And so that's the unique thing about this particular syzygy of the series of them that come this summer. This was the only one that did not have a hard aspect by sign to Mars and Saturn. And so in some ways this is maybe even calmer than the rest of the new moons and full moons this summer. First, I just want to point out, full moons. This study from the British Medical Journal, this was in '84 actually, Full Moon and Crime, C.P. Thakur, Dilip Sharma. And they had this study where they determined that the incidences of crime committed on full moon days was much higher than on all other days. And so I just want to start here. This is why we talk about full moon intensity. There's some astrological texts saying you don't elect when the moon is close to fullness or just after fullness. It's just too intense. There's too much charge. And so that's something to keep in mind if you're feeling a culmination or a climax that's quite charged and intense. It's natural to feel that as the moon gains its fullness. I will say these studies have been disputed, but I think it's interesting to see in such a prestigious journal. So just to dig deeper, just look at Capricorn as an archetype. That's where the moon is. It's worth noting that the moon is in what's called as exile in Capricorn, the opposite of where it's comfortable. It's like being farthest away from home. And so there's something at odds with the archetype of Capricorn and the nature of the moon. Remember, the moon is nourishment, comfort, physical comfort, the kind of deeper structure of reality and its mystery, and then the sort of womb that brings us warmth and nourishment. What is Capricorn? Well, I want to turn to Alan Leo. He's an astrologer responsible for sun sign astrology, a lot of people say. And so Alan Leo kind of gets a bad rap amongst the traditional revivalists as someone who maybe problematized astrology or made it, too simplistic. I don't really see it that way. I mean, I think that he's engaged pretty potently with the symbols, and that's really, as I see it, what matters. That's why I like to find writers. Remember, these symbols are living, and so people have engaged with something like Capricorn almost in a continuous chain, or definitely in a continuous chain all the way back. And so Alan Leo had his living engagement with this symbol, just like I'm doing now, and we're doing now because of this full moon. But he's breaking it down in terms of the rising sign in this passage. And so this is from the Horoscope in Detail by Alan Leo and H.S. Green. It's an astrological manual they wrote, published in 1906. But he talks about characteristics: self-possessed, self-controlled, patient, persistent, persevering, steady, and then here, disposition serious, cold, and sometimes despondent. And that's where I think the moon's exile comes in. Cold and despondency is not something we think of as lunar. We usually think of warm comfort, like a warm womb, right? Where you can get under those covers and feel nourished. And so this is why there is tension here. And so right away, this full moon has this tension built in. And I think about the summertime, right? It's very hot outside. Sometimes that's uncomfortable. Or the idea that now we're heading towards winter. I mean, you're already seeing news stories about how it's going to be really cold, particularly in Europe, if they don't have the gas. There's this kind of reminder of wintertime here, just as we get in past the solstice, and now the sun is getting less and less and less in the summer months. So there's Alan Leo. The other thing I want to look at is the Plutonic, because it's somewhat near Pluto. And And I think it's a good syzygy to bring a little bit of Pluto back in, given that there's not much close to the moon except Pluto. I'm coming back here to Rudyard, his book New Mansions for New Men. He talks about Pluto as the sower of celestial seed, and it fits this theme I've been discussing on this channel of Pluto as a regenerative force. And in this first paragraph of this essay, he's talking about the discovery of Pluto in January 1930, and that the message was the awakened souls and minds will become the foundation seed of a new world. So he really pins a lot on this discovery of Pluto as kind of the birth of a whole new age. The power and promise of Pluto's discovery kind of ushering in symbolically this new moment. So he says here, the message of Pluto is that of divine substantiality. The soul can be made substantial. It can be made concrete. Men will be free to demonstrate in radiant bodies and prosperous lives filled with abundance and health, the gods they are. Isn't that profound? The idea that the Plutonic is like the godly nature, our true godly selves that we can radiate from the rebirthing process. So this is a theme I just want you to consider, because what's going to happen in the astrology over the next 2 months is very difficult, with Mars and Saturn squaring the sun and the moon during their syzygies. And we're going to have a Mars retrograde. And I think this full moon, if we think about the deep kind of profundity of the soul and our purpose, and we can tap into that here in some kind of climax as a way to sort of set up, flower into something that we can then use to navigate for the year, the astrology of 2022. And then the final thing I want to do is just check out the fixed star conjunction to the moon. This moon will be 7 degrees from Pluto, but it's right next to 52 degree minutes from fixed star Sulafat. This very much inspires me to see that not only is it the new seeds of Pluto being planted here in this full moon, but it's the conjunction to Sulafat, which is a fixed star in the lyre, in the constellation Lyra. It's right in the lyre that makes up the constellation Lyra. It's one of the strings of this beautiful musical instrument, one of my favorite, I think, constellations. So Sulafat is a bright yellow star in Lyra. Just to give a little bit of backdrop, this is from Robson, Fixed Stars and Constellations. He talks about how this lyre, this musical instrument, came to be in terms of the myth. Mercury found the body of a tortoise cast upon the Nile and discovered that by striking the sinews after the flesh was consumed, a musical note was obtained. He made a lyra of a similar shape, having 3 strings. He gave it to Orpheus, the son of Calliope, and who by its music enchanted the beasts, the birds, and the rocks. So this is the idea of the music of Orpheus. We have it in the Orphic hymns that are so popular in contemporary astrological practice. Beautiful, beautiful poems and songs. They are from the Hellenistic world. The cult of Orpheus, this is an extremely important and powerful symbol here. This fixed star and this whole constellation. And so we've got the moon very near it. And it brings to mind the generative forces, the way that singing and even humming, like you can go to ancient cultures and you're making a utterance with a voice as a spiritual practice, as a way to connect to some kind of primal divinity, very Plutonic. So this fits with this idea of Pluto as the new seed that can flower, and music may have a role to play in our discovering ourselves, discovering our purpose, even putting the music on you like, or just being with the musical or making music, I think could be a wonderful way to engage the symbolism of this moment. The last thing I want to bring in here is a poet, a very excellent poet, Rainer Maria Rilke. And so Rilke wrote a book of poems, Austrian poet. He wrote a whole book of sonnets to Orpheus. And just going to read a little bit of sonnet number 1. He writes, "There the tree rises, O pure surpassing, O Orpheus sings, O great tree of sound, and all is silent. And from this silence arise new beginnings, intimations, changings." How Plutonic is that? If you compare that first stanza of the sonnet to Orpheus to Rudyard's musings on Pluto and the idea of a new emergence coming out of the deep silence even of the forest right here in Capricorn. And so I think that just to come back to like the energy of the moment, really maybe being still with the chaos, right? Still with the intensity of the full moon, trying to feel what's being maybe deeply calling to you, deeply calling, whether it's your surroundings or your unconscious or what's being made conscious in this moment, as a way to prepare and to hear that deep music of your soul to ride out this next period, the fixed intensity, that second eclipse season square Saturn, and the Mars retrograde in Gemini, which will define the second half of the year. This feels like a special moment, a full moon, averse to Saturn, configured well to Mars. The lunar nodes are also configured well by trine and sextile, just like Mars. conjoined Pluto, there's a sense of rebirth through maybe coolness, cool perseverance, kind of cool dislodgement, but for the purpose of digging deeper. And hearing this music, these intimations of maybe the new world that's calling you. The one last thing I wanted to say, there's something very special about the Cancer-Capricorn axis. It's in the theme of Monday, the birth chart of the universe. You have the Cancer moon. Saturn is in Capricorn. And so this is the primal axis, the core axis of that theme of mundi, of the whole universe. Cancer, the cosmic womb, the Gaian womb, the birthing of consciousness itself. And then Capricorn, the energy that balances out the newness of creation with the kind of seriousness of maybe questions about what happens when creation dies. What happens when creation comes to an ending state and has to rejuvenate itself, right? That's Capricorn, where Saturn is. And so these kind of rejuvenative questions, what is maybe decaying, what feels cold and separative, and what's emerging, what's that deep, profound music that's maybe calling you to something new this summer and for the rest of this year. So enjoy this powerful full moon and relish in it if you can, this kind of profound, maybe challenged energy. And I think we have to be grateful. I've been thinking about that the last few days with that really rough Scorpio moon, right? That intensity. What can we be grateful for even when things are maybe feeling chaotic? So have a lovely full moon.